Delving through the international version, or Elena has anyway, she's with us here on set. Egypt continuing to dominate the headlines with kind of worse and worse reports of police violence.
Every time the army fires a shot, the people get more determined. That's the headline of a piece in here in today's Guardian by the Egyptian journalist Adaf Souif. She's been on the ground in Tahrir Square. There's some extraordinary pictures in their article, actually, of people being overwhelmed by tear gas. And the article says that the fact that the Egyptian army are allowing these pictures to go all around the world, Tahrir Square, that was a symbol of revolution, being pictured covered in clouds of tear gas, just shows how much they've lost the plot, really, she says. She says protesters are going out onto Tahrir Square with their phone numbers and names written on their arms so they can be identified if they're killed, and with gas masks and swimming goggles. Now, why exactly is the Egyptian police going to such lengths of brutality, though? They report, for example, that they're using an unusual type of tear gas called CR gas that's banned for use in Europe that causes people to cough up blood. So why are they going so far? That's the headline of a piece in the Daily Beast, which reckons that the Egyptian police are defending what they themselves have acquired, their own privileges. They say they've lived for years on the proceeds of corruption and electoral fraud, and the police are worried that any kind of real regime change will mean that the relative wealth and privileges that they enjoy in Egypt will be swept away.
I know you've been looking at some of the Egyptian papers as well, some of them talking about forming a national unity government.
Yes, El Aram today is looking at who, how and when such a government could be formed. Now, they reckon almost no politician would actually agree to serve under it as long as it's the army that really holds the power. But they do point out the former Arab League Secretary-General, now presidential candidate Amr Moussa, met with some generals in Egypt last night. So they say he perhaps might be persuaded to run in a government like that. If you're confused about all of this, there's quite a good graphic on the Arabist blog where they've drawn up a map showing a sort of graphic showing exactly where all those parties stand. So on the left there, you've got the people, the protesters in Tahrir Square, who won't support anything that the army suggests. A little bit further to the right, you've got Mohammed al-Baradei, who's considering the possibility that a national unity government might be a good interim solution. And then over on the right of that, you've got the Muslim Brotherhood, who want the current electoral elections planned for next week to go ahead as planned. They don't want any change.
Yeah, good way to get your head around who's where in the Egyptian world there. Some other Arab nations also in the papers. We've had Yemen, the president stepping down, and also in Bahrain, this report admitting to human rights abuses.
Yes, the Washington Post has compared those two countries in a piece that says they both have new hope today after the Bahraini government promised reforms after that report, and of course Saleh has agreed to step down in Yemen. But they say that human rights activists aren't too happy in either country. In Yemen, opposition protesters are still on the streets. They're unhappy, of course, that he's going to get immunity from prosecution. And in Bahrain, hundreds of political prisoners remain in jail. So they say we shouldn't celebrate too soon in either of those countries. Although some papers are more positive. If we look at Gulf News' cartoon, they've got Yemen there crawling up slowly towards the light, and the National's editorial also says that we can be hopeful for Yemen now. We have at least got rid of the major stumbling block towards the end of a conflict there, although of course holding elections as they've promised is going to be very difficult and complicated because of the security situation.
Good to see Mr. Yemen. Newspapers in South Africa, they're furious over censorship.
Yes, just quickly, they called yesterday Black Tuesday. A lot of the South African papers published an entirely black cover with censored written across it. We can see the Mail and Guardian, for example, did that after they were stopped from publishing a story about the parliamentary speaker. This is because of a law that's been published in South Africa, which the Guardian calls a shame for the ANC. Nelson Mandela has actually spoken out against this law, but that hasn't stopped his party passing it. It bans journalists from investigating anything to do with national security. One more question just quickly for you then, Stuart, to end with. What do you think George Clooney, Cristiano Ronaldo and 33 glamour models have in common?
Well, the first and the third, presumably some kind of film, but I'm not quite sure.
That the list of witnesses who've been called by a court in Milan for Silvio Berlusconi's trial on claims he had sex with an underage girl, Karima Al-Maroug, best known as Ruby Heartstealer, and of course for abusing his office over that. Now, they're hoping to use those witnesses to discredit her statement because she claims that George Clooney was a guest at some of Berlusconi's dinners and also that she herself spent the night with Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, they're hoping those celebrities will deny those claims and thus discredit her as a witness.
There were only 33 glamour models, so I thought it couldn't be that. All right, Elena, thanks so much. That's Elena with the international papers here on France 24. Just going to remind you of one of our headlines today. In fact,